The courtroom was silent. Not the kind of silence you get when everyone's waiting for a verdict. This was different. This was the kind of silence that drops like a bomb. After an 8-year-old boy stands up, clutches a worn photograph to his chest, and looks the judge dead in the eye. "You're my mom," he says. No stuttering, no fear, just raw, heartbreaking certainty. Gasps ripple through the courtroom. A woman in the gallery drops her purse. A bailiff actually forgets to breathe. And at the bench, the woman in the black robe, the one used to silencing chaos with a single glance, freezes because she knows those eyes. Because somewhere, deep beneath a decade of grief, a voice inside her whispers, "It's him." Her hands grip the edge of the bench like a lifeline. The name on the file burns in her mind. Micah Freeman, 8 years old, 7 foster homes, no known biological family. But the photo he's holding, it's not just a photo. It's her, pregnant, smiling, alive with hope, on a day she thought was long buried in a grave. And now, that memory is standing in front of her, small, shaking, but unbreakable. "You're my mom," he repeats, voice trembling but louder this time. And with that, everything she thought she knew about her job, her past, and herself starts to crack. The courtroom erupts into noise. Lawyers murmuring, foster parents panicking, reporters scrambling to check their notes. But she hears none of it. All she can see is the boy, and all she can hear is a lullaby. One she hasn't sung in years, echoing in the back of her mind. He remembers. God help her. He remembers. And in that moment, the most powerful woman in the room, a woman who's delivered hundreds of verdicts, sent people to prison, and shattered families for justice, realizes something earth-shattering. She's not the judge anymore. She's the mother. And this case, this is going to change everything. Back in her chambers, the door clicked shut behind her. But the boy's voice wouldn't stop echoing in her ears. "You're my mom." Her fingers shook as they reached for the photograph still clutched in her hand. The corners were frayed. The color faded. But the truth? Undeniable. It was her, not in a courtroom robe, but in a hospital gown. Smiling, pregnant, hopeful. She dropped into her chair like the weight of the world had just been thrown on her shoulders. Because 8 years ago, she'd been told her baby had died. Complications, an emergency C-section. A nurse with eyes too kind for the words she said. "I'm so sorry. He didn't make it." She never got to hold him, never saw his face. Just a death certificate, a tiny knit cap, and an empty nursery she locked shut and never entered again. Until now, until today, until that little boy walked into her courtroom, looked into her soul, and shattered every lie she had ever accepted as truth. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "If that's him, then what the hell happened?" She reached for the drawer she hadn't opened in years. Inside, a hospital bracelet with his name, a handwritten card from the nurse, and the certificate that claimed he died at birth. Except, there was no attending physician listed, no time of death, no autopsy report, just signatures, her own scrawled and drugged. And one more, a name she hadn't thought about in years, Jennifer Kirkland. Her heart stopped. The same name the boy had whispered to the social worker, the nurse who gave him that photo, the woman who vanished after the hospital shut down their maternity wing. Her instincts, honed from years of reading people, digging through lies, seeing truth in silence, screamed now. He wasn't delusional. He wasn't confused. He remembered. And the only reason she didn't was because someone made sure she wouldn't. By the time she re-entered the courtroom, the air had shifted. The boy had been led to a waiting room. The Turners were whispering frantically to their attorney, and Sarah Martinez, the social worker, stood frozen near the bench like she, too, had just glimpsed a ghost. Rebecca, Judge Williams, cleared her throat. Court is back in session. But it wasn't. Not really. Because no one knew what to do when the rules no longer applied. When the case file no longer fit the reality. When a judge, of all people, was accused of being someone's mother. Whispers echoed from the gallery. Did he really say that? Could it be true? 8 years? The Turner's lawyer was first to recover. Your Honor, this child is clearly traumatized. His statement, while heartbreaking, must be viewed as a symptom of psychological distress, not fact. She nodded slowly. And yet... She held up the photograph. The one he had dropped. The one she now knew was real. My name is written on the back. In handwriting I recognize. The room stilled. Patricia Turner stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. He's manipulating everyone. You can't possibly think... Sit down, Mrs. Turner, Judge Williams said quietly, but with enough weight to freeze her in place. Then she turned to Sarah Martinez. Tell me everything you know about this child's origins. Sarah hesitated, then pulled the file from her bag. No birth certificate. No medical history prior to foster intake. He was surrendered as a newborn to a private agency. New Beginnings Family Services. The agency shut down 5 years ago after some financial irregularities. A chill swept through Rebecca's spine. She remembered them. The same agency that had helped her fill out adoption paperwork for another family. Back when she still believed she'd never be a mother. Now the pieces were aligning. The falsified death certificate. The missing birth record. The boy's eyes. Someone had stolen her son. And someone had profited. She took a breath, then turned to the gallery. This court is suspending proceedings. Effective immediately, I am recusing myself from this case. And I'm ordering an emergency investigation into all records associated with Elijah Marshall, New Beginnings Family Services, and Riverside Memorial Hospital. A gasp rippled through the room, then silence. Then, James Turner muttered under his breath. A sound that barely made it past his lips. We said he'd remember. We warned them. It was quiet, but not quiet enough. Rebecca's gaze snapped to him. What did you say? His eyes widened, too late. The room exploded. The moment Judge Williams recused herself, chaos bloomed like wildfire. She wasn't just stepping off the bench. She was stepping into the story. Within the hour, courtroom security had escorted the Turners out for questioning. Sarah Martinez had filed an emergency motion to place Elijah under temporary protection with the state. But Rebecca said no. He's coming with me. The room had paused, just long enough for everyone to realize. This wasn't just a legal crisis. It was personal. It was seismic. By that evening, Elijah sat at her kitchen table, legs swinging under the chair, staring at the only woman who had never looked away from him. I always knew I had a mom, he whispered. I just didn't know if she remembered me. Rebecca reached across the table, her hand trembling as it met his. I never forgot. Outside, the city was quiet. But inside their home, it felt like the center of a hurricane. She didn't sleep. She called in every favor she had. Old colleagues, law clerks, journalists, a private investigator named Malcolm Reese. Within 12 hours, Malcolm had hacked together a preliminary report. What I'm seeing here, he said, sliding a folder across her table, is a cover-up with surgical precision. Riverside Memorial, New Beginnings Family Services, and a network of forged death certificates tied to at least 19 infants across 5 states. Rebecca stared at the names. Mothers marked as deceased. Babies marked as stillborn. Payments, hundreds of thousands, shuffled through non-profit fronts. "This isn't negligence," she murmured. "It's trafficking." Malcolm nodded. Industrial scale. Organized. Sanitized by judges, doctors, and social workers who knew how to erase footprints. And she had signed off on some of them. Not knowing, but still. She pressed her palms into her temples. How did they choose the mothers? Isolated, educated, vulnerable, single, professional. Women whose babies would be considered desirable to adoptive buyers, and who had no family strong enough to fight. Rebecca's breath hitched. That had been her. Down to the very last trait. The next morning, Elijah found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a picture she'd once tucked away so deep she forgot she had it. It was her. 8 months pregnant, in a hospital gown, smiling at the camera with hope in her eyes. "I remember that," Elijah said softly, pointing to the photo. She looked at him sharply. "You remember?" He nodded. "Not everything. Just your voice and the song." Her blood went cold. She hadn't sung that lullaby in years, but when she hummed the first few notes, he finished it, note for note, like a code from a past only they could understand. By 10 a.m. the next morning, Rebecca stood in the lobby of the Riverside Memorial Archives, a badge of her old authority clipped to her coat, Elijah's photograph in her wallet. Next to her, Malcolm Reese wore a fake ID and an even faker smile. But what he held, that was real. A court order, signed by a federal judge at 2 a.m., granting them emergency access to sealed records for anomalous infant mortality documentation. They called it anomaly. She called it murder by paperwork. The hospital clerk led them down into the sub-level. Fluorescent lights buzzing, walls yellowed with time. It was where secrets came to rest. Room 37, a filing cabinet labeled Deceased Neonates, 2015. Malcolm opened it. Row after row of files marked stillborn, but not a single photo. No autopsy reports. No release forms for burial. Just names, dates, and signatures from hospital administrators, including one in particular, Dr. Vincent Harrow. Rebecca froze. That name, it had been stamped on Elijah's so-called death certificate. She pulled it up on her phone, compared signatures. They matched, too perfectly. Malcolm leaned in. "This isn't a human hand. It's a scan. A printed signature, copied, pasted. Look at the artifacts in the ink." They dug deeper. File after file, the same patterns emerged. Same doctor, same nurse, same agency that took custody, New Beginnings Family Services. But when they tried to locate the original birth certificates, nothing. Destroyed in a flood, the hospital once claimed. Malcolm looked at Rebecca. "I smell bleach, not rainwater." By noon, they had scanned everything they could find, and just as they were packing up, the clerk returned. Panicked. "There's someone upstairs asking about your visit." Rebecca tensed. "Who?" The clerk shrugged. "Said he was from legal, but didn't give a name." Malcolm grabbed the files. "We're done here." Back at her home, Sarah Martinez was waiting, her face pale, her hands trembling. I pulled Elijah's intake record from the agency system. She held out a single sheet of paper. It listed Elijah Marshall as surrendered at birth by an unnamed mother. Rebecca nearly dropped it. She'd never signed anything, never even saw her son's body. Her hand reached out, trembling, as she turned over the page, and saw it. A scanned signature, her name, but it wasn't hers. "I never wrote this," she whispered. "Someone forged my name." Malcolm stared at the document. "That's it. That's your key. We go public with this. Today, Sarah hesitated. Rebecca, if you do this, they will come after you. You'll be testifying not just as a judge, but as a mother. A victim. Rebecca looked at Elijah. He was standing in the hallway, clutching that same photo to his chest. She walked over, kneeled beside him, and whispered, "No more hiding. Not for you. Not for me. Not for any of the others." That night, they uploaded the files to 3 servers, sent them to trusted journalists, and waited. The spark had been struck. By morning, the first headlines would land like a lightning bolt. Falsified death certificates, forged adoptions, one judge's fight to expose a baby trafficking network. And it all started with 4 words. "You're my mom." The story broke at 7:12 a.m., before most people had even touched their coffee, before Elijah had finished tying his shoes, before Rebecca could take her first breath of hope. Her face was already on every screen. Family court judge accused of violating judicial conduct. Involved in viral baby trafficking allegations. The retaliation was instant and calculated. An anonymous ethics complaint was filed with the state bar within hours. Judicial integrity questioned. Conflicts of interest cited. A whisper campaign launched on social media. She's unstable. Emotionally compromised. Exploiting a child for fame. It wasn't coming from strangers. It was coming from inside the system. The very system she once swore to protect. Sarah Martinez burst through the door at 9 a.m., holding her tablet. "They're freezing court records, Becca. New Beginnings just filed a cease and desist on your name, claiming defamation." Rebecca didn't even look up. She was holding a photograph. The one of her and Elijah at the hospital garden. "They can erase records," she said softly. "But they can't erase this." Across town, Malcolm Reese was being followed. Not subtly. 2 cars. Alternating positions. He'd noticed them leaving the safe house that morning. He didn't go home. He went to a parking garage, top level, nowhere to hide. He parked, waited, then stepped out and faced them. "You can't intimidate me," he said calmly. "I've already uploaded everything. Come near me again, and the backups go public, raw, and unredacted." The cars peeled off. Back at Rebecca's home, Agent Naomi Brooks arrived with a grim face. "You need to leave, now." Rebecca blinked. "Leave? Why?" Brooks didn't blink. "There was a break-in at Sarah's office this morning. Her files on Elijah were taken." Rebecca went cold. "Elijah, he's safe," Naomi said. "But you're not. Whoever's behind this, Dr. Harrow, Judge Marks, New Beginnings, they're losing control. And people like that don't go down quietly." They moved fast. Within the hour, Rebecca and Elijah were being driven out of the city, escorted by 2 unmarked vehicles to a secured location owned by the federal government. Malcolm was already there. So was Jenny Kirkland. She hadn't spoken a word since arriving. Her hands shook as she clutched a paper folder to her chest. Inside it, the second set of blueprints, the ones not filed with the state, the ones that detailed hospital wings, constructed for one purpose only: private postnatal isolation and expedited custodial transfer. Translation? A baby trafficking factory. Rebecca stared at the documents. Room numbers, medical codes, patient ID numbers, cross-referenced with deceased infants, and handwritten notes in the margins from Dr. Harrow himself. "They planned it all," Jenny whispered. "Which babies to take? Which mothers wouldn't be believed?" The walls of the safe house felt too small for the truth. By evening, federal prosecutors had been briefed. A RICO case was underway. But it would take time. And Rebecca? She didn't have time. Because that night, Elijah had another nightmare. But this time, it wasn't about the Turners or the darkness. It was about losing her again. He woke up crying. "What if they take you away?" He sobbed, clutching her robe. "They won't," she whispered. And then, with fire in her eyes, "Because I'm not just your mom anymore, Elijah. I'm the storm that's coming for them." The federal courthouse was overflowing. Not with spectators, with ghosts. Mothers clutching faded photographs. Children with matching scars and blank stares. Fathers holding hope like it was something fragile and borrowed. They all came, because one woman refused to stay silent. Rebecca Williams stood at the witness stand, flanked by security, facing 3 federal judges and a sea of attorneys. Agent Naomi Brooks sat nearby, her notes already memorized. Marcus Chen had brought backup drives. Jenny Kirkland clutched a worn folder like it was her final breath. And Elijah, he was home, watching live, tucked in Sarah's arms. They told Rebecca to keep her statement short. She didn't. "I've worn this robe for 15 years, she said, her voice firm. "Today is the first time I wear it for justice. Not just the law." She held up the falsified death certificate. "This piece of paper stole my son." She held up Jenny's photograph. This one gave him back. Every screen in the country was watching. As Dr. Vincent Harrow sat silent at the defense table, as Judge Leonard Marks shifted nervously beside him, as the name New Beginnings Family Services became synonymous with systemic evil. Then came the recordings, Jenny's voice, the hidden audio. "Just mark the baby deceased. The mother's under anesthesia. She won't remember a thing." Then the ledger. Hundreds of names, dates, amounts. $325,000. Male, 6 libs, no known defects. Delivered 11:46 p.m., discharged 3:12 a.m. The room was silent. Even the judges didn't interrupt. When Marcus presented the mapping of foster homes, false identities, and buried records, the conspiracy became undeniable. And when Agent Brooks dropped the final photo on the screen, a hallway camera still shot of Dr. Harrow handing a breathing newborn to 2 strangers under the label "deceased." Even the defense attorney removed his glasses and whispered, "My God." The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled. Phones vibrated with push notifications. Breaking. FBI confirms baby trafficking ring spanned 30-plus years, 12 states. Former family court judge spearheads historic testimony. One boy's 4 words spark national reckoning. But victory doesn't come without a price. That night, as the grand jury announced formal indictments, Rebecca collapsed. Not physically, emotionally. The weight of 8 years without her son. The faces of every child still lost. The understanding that she'd win, but never undo what was done. Jenny stayed by her side. "I used to think the truth would set us free," Rebecca whispered. Jenny nodded. "It does. But it doesn't heal us," Rebecca added. "No," Jenny said quietly. "But it gives us somewhere to start." The following week, she was offered her judgeship back. She declined. "I have work to do." Instead, she launched the Elijah Foundation, a national registry, free DNA testing, legal aid for reunification, therapeutic services for families torn apart. Elijah's photo sat at the center of every campaign. A boy who remembered. A mother who refused to forget. And a system that underestimated them both. But behind every triumph, a cost. Rebecca's personal address was leaked. Protesters claimed she was lying, that she fabricated her story for political gain. They sent threats. One night, someone threw red paint across her car. Elijah didn't sleep that night. "Why are they mad at us for telling the truth?" he asked. Rebecca held him close. "Because truth terrifies people who've lived comfortably with lies." And then she whispered what she'd never said before. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there when you were born." Elijah looked up, eyes wide and calm. "But you came back," he said simply. And I remembered your song. One by one, other children remembered too. One by one, other mothers stepped forward. One by one, justice arrived. Not all at once, but enough. Rebecca stood before Congress 6 months later, not as a judge, not even as a mother, but as a survivor. "Don't you dare call these children lost," she said. "They were stolen. The stars were out again, same as that night in the safe house. Same quiet breeze, same song, same boy. Now fast asleep in a bed that finally felt like his." Rebecca sat beside the window, pen in hand. The letter she was writing wasn't to Congress, not to the FBI, not even to the foundation she'd built from ash. It was to the mothers who were still waiting. "Dear Mama," she wrote, "I don't know your name, but I know your grief. I've held it too. And I want you to know, you're not crazy. You didn't imagine that heartbeat, that cry, that instant when your world changed. They told us we were wrong, that our babies were gone, that the silence in our arms was the end. But silence can be faked, paperwork can be forged, grief can be weaponized. What can't be stolen?" She paused, then smiled. "Is the love we never stopped feeling." Outside her home, the world had changed. The Elijah Foundation had reunited 87 children in 6 months. 6 more hospitals were under investigation. Congress was holding emergency hearings, and a lullaby, a simple hum between breaths, had become the anthem of a movement. A documentary was released, "You're My Mom," not a courtroom drama. A revolution in 4 words. One child's voice that echoed across states, pierced through corruption, and reminded a broken nation of what matters most. At the family reunification conference held in Washington, 100 candles were lit. Each one symbolized a child who had found their way home. Elijah stood at the podium in a tiny suit jacket, his voice steady. "They said I was too quiet to matter. They said my photo didn't prove anything. They said I made it up." He looked at his mother, then back at the crowd. "But I remembered." The room stood in silence, then thundered into applause. A journalist asked Rebecca that night, "What do you hope people take away from your story?" She didn't flinch. That every system can be unmade, every lie can unravel, and even in the darkest lie, truth waits. Sometimes all it takes. She looked at Elijah, asleep with his photograph clutched to his chest. Is a child brave enough to speak, and a mother who refuses to stop listening? Because at the end of it all, this wasn't just about law, not about courtrooms, not about DNA tests or press conferences or handcuffs. It was about love. The kind that crosses years, the kind that outlives paperwork, the kind that hums lullabies even in nightmares. And if you're wondering what happened to the other mothers, they're coming, one by one, armed with hope, guided by memory, ready to fight. Because when truth has a name and love has a voice, the world must listen. What would you do if the child you thought was gone looked into your eyes and called you mom? Sometimes justice doesn't come with a gavel. It comes in the trembling voice of a child, remembering what the world tried to erase. Sometimes truth isn't written in files. It's etched in lullabies, in a heartbeat remembered, in eyes that never forget. And sometimes, one brave whisper in a courtroom can bring a whole system crashing down. If this story moved you, don't just scroll past. Subscribe for more stories that challenge power, uplift truth, and remind us that no lie, no matter how cruel, can outlive love. Leave a comment below. What would you do if your child looked at you after 8 years and said, "You're my mom"? Because at KaYi, we don't just tell stories. We give voice to those the system tried to silence. And we believe something powerful. Love remembers, even when the world forgets. We'll see you in the next episode.